All right, there we go. And then we're going to go to share screen. And you got that. Share. And then we've got the PowerPoint. And is that it?
Yep.
Good deal.
All right. So no matter what kind of animal you are, human, paramecium, they all work under these same three principles, motivational trend. So it's seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, and conserving energy. So it kind of seems like common sense, but it's really good to kind of go over each of these things. So think about what motivates us to do what we do every day. So we want to be pleasurable. We don't want it to have any pain. We want to conserve energy as much as we can. And the good example of that is if say you're really hungry and you're out in a field somewhere and you see an apple tree there, and like the next apple tree over, really low, you see a really ripe apple. It looks really good, ready to eat. And then about another 50 yards down the way, you'll see another apple tree. You see another apple that's a little bit higher in the tree. It looks like it might be even riper and tastier than the one that's right there. So we're already dealing with all three of those things right there. It's like, well, should I go for the one that's low-hanging fruit? I can just grab it right off the vine and eat it. And tasty, maybe it's not as sweet and tasty as the one that's a little bit further, but you're having to go make that judgment every day. You're going for every decision. It's like, well, yeah, I could walk a little bit further, get to the further apple tree, but I have to climb the tree, get up to the one that's a little bit sweeter. So that would take more energy, and I might fall and get hurt trying to climb up there. And you're actually burning more calories going up to get to that one. And so you're thinking about, well, I want to avoid pain. I want to conserve energy. I don't want to burn more than I have to. But so we're always making those judgments based on those three things. And all animals, all species of living organisms do this, have the same philosophy. So it kind of makes sense, but it's kind of really important to kind of just recognize that. So even if the apple is a little bit sweeter, we get maybe a little bit more pleasure out of it. It might be worth it because we wanted to avoid pain and conserve energy. So we all make our decisions every day based on these three principles. There's actually a book I'm going to go at the end when I close out the PowerPoint. I'm going to go to the class website and I'm going to show you some of the resources that I'm using tonight that you can refer to later. This is from the book, The Pleasure Trap. So here's the pleasure trap. So it's deceiving our instincts. So using those same principles, if you make pleasure so overwhelmingly good, then you might then decide to not worry about pain, and you might actually not care about conserving energy because the pleasure is so intense. So like an example, they've done experiments, like a rat will choose cocaine over food every time, even though their life depends on the food. So they'll take rats in their cages and they can push a little button and down comes a little bit of liquid cocaine, and they can have it as often as they want. And then there's another button that will give them food. And then there's even ones where they've done where another button will allow the rat to go into a cage where the opposite sex is to mate. And every single time the rat will choose the cocaine over the food and over the sex, basically, over the reproduction, to the point where they'll starve themselves to death and they'll die because the pleasure of the cocaine is so high that it overrides all those other things. So we have that motivational trap we went over. So the pleasure can be so intense that it cannot stay away from it. It's just too good, right? And so that's what the pleasure trap is. We'll go into that in more detail as we talk about food. But first, I want to show a couple of videos from Dr. Greger, just to kind of give you an explanation of what's going on in the brain with things like sugar and things like that. So the first video is more about sugar, and the second video is more about fat. And so you can kind of see some of the science of what's going on in the brain with this pleasure trap.
People have chewed coca leaves for at least 8,000 years as a mild stimulant without any evidence of addiction. But when certain components are isolated and concentrated into coke,
it's coming out of here, not out of the speakers. the sound was coming out of here, not out of the Yeah, it's not coming out of the speakers.
Okay, so that's because this isn't plugged in. Try it again.
Cane, we've got a problem. The same may be true of sugar. People don't tend to binge on bananas. It's perhaps the reason we're more likely to supersize soda than sweet potatoes, why we're less likely to overeat scientific grounds. But now we have PET scans, imaging technology that can measure brain activity. It all started with this publication, showing decreased dopamine sensitivity in obese individuals, and the heavier they were, the less responsive they appeared to become. We see the same thing in cocaine addicts and alcoholics. This would suggest that a reduction in dopamine receptors is associated with addictive behavior, irrespective of whether it's due to food or to addictive drugs, as seen in substance abusers. Dopamine is considered the neurotransmitter primarily involved in the pleasure and reward center of our brain, helping to motivate our drive for things like food, water, and sex, all necessary for the perpetuation of our species. It was healthy and adaptive for our primate brains to drive us to eat that banana when there wasn't much food around, but now that fruit is in loop form, this adaptation has become a dangerous liability. The original Coca-Cola formulation actually included coca leaf, but now perhaps its sugar content may be the addictive stand-in. Like the tobacco companies and other drug lords, have been able to come up with products that tap into that same dopamine reward system. Why a picture of a cheeseburger rather than sugary soda pop? Well, now we know fat may have similar effects on the brain as well. You feed some people some yogurt packed with butterfat, and within 30 minutes you can start to see the same changes in brain activity you get when you drink sugar water. People who regularly eat ice cream, sugar and fat, have a deadened dopamine response in their brains to drinking a milkshake. It's like when drug abusers have to use more and more to get the same high. Frequent ice cream consumption is related to a reduction in reward region responsivity in humans. They're talking about the pleasure center in the brain, paralleling the tolerance observed in drug addiction. Once we've so dulled our dopamine response, we may subsequently overeat in an effort to achieve the degree of satisfaction experienced previously, which contributes to unhealthy weight gain. What do fatty, sugary foods have in common? They are energy-dense foods. It may be less the number of calories than their concentration. Consumption of a calorie-dense diet, compared to the same number of calories in a calorie-dilute diet, leads to that numbing of the dopamine response. It's like the difference between cocaine and crack. Same stuff chemically, but by smoking crack cocaine, we can deliver the kind of a higher dose quicker to our brain. As an aside, I found it interesting that the control drink in these milkshake studies wasn't just water. They can't use water because our brain can actually taste water on the tongue. I didn't know that. So they had to use artificial saliva. They made people drink a solution designed to mimic the natural taste of saliva. Ew. Anyway, with this new understanding of the neural correlates of food addiction, there have been calls to include obesity as an official mental disorder. After all, both obesity and addiction share the inability to restrain behavior in spite of an awareness of detrimental health consequences. That's one of the defining criteria of substance abuse. You keep putting crap in your body, despite the knowledge that you have a problem that is likely caused by the crap. Yet you can't stop. Redefining obesity as an addiction, as a psychiatric disease, would be a boon to drug companies that are already working on a whole bunch of drugs to muck with our brain chemistry. For example, you give people an opiate blocker, like they do for people with heroin overdoses to block the effects of the drug, and people eat significantly less cheese. It just doesn't do as much for them anymore when their opiate receptors are blocked. Rather than taking drugs, though, we can prevent the deadening of our pleasure center in the first place by sticking to foods that are naturally calorically dilute, like whole plant foods. This can help bring back our dopamine sensitivity, such that we can again derive the same pleasure from the simplest of foods. And this is not just for people who are obese. Yes, when we regularly eat calorie-dense animal and junk foods like ice cream, we can blunt our pleasure center and overeat to compensate. But when our brain downregulates dopamine receptors to deal with all these jolts of fat and sugar, we may experience less enjoyment from other activities as well. That's why cocaine addicts may have an impaired neurological capacity to enjoy sex, why smokers also have an impaired ability to respond to positive stimuli. Since these all involve the same dopamine pathways, what we put into our body, what we eat, can affect how we experience all of life's pleasures. So to live life to the fullest, what's the solution? Well, the food industry, according to some addiction specialists, should be given incentives to develop low-calorie foods that are more attractive, palatable, and affordable, so that people can adhere to diet programs for a long time. No need. Mother Nature beat them all to it.
All right, so a couple things there you might have found interesting. The opiate blocker, it's actually called naltrexone. Like Narcan, you hear about people that have overdose on heroin or fentanyl, and they can spray it up their nose. Narcan, kind of a similar drug, and actually one of the weight loss drugs out right now called Contrave, which is basically a combination of bupropion, which is Wellbutrin, we've used for years to help people quit smoking, and then naltrexone, which is an opiate blocker. And that's some of the studies that they had were from that. And so what might be interesting to you is the primary protein in dairy products, especially cheese, really high in cheese, is casein protein. When it goes into your body, it gets converted into casomorphin, morphin like morphine. And so we all know that dairy products will cause constipation because morphine will cause constipation, pain medicines, right? And then those pain medicines then go to the opiate receptors. And so this naltrexone blocks the opiate receptors. And so when they did those studies giving people cheese, it was double-blinded, so people didn't know if they got a sugar pill or the naltrexone. And the ones that got the naltrexone, when they ate the cheese, it was kind of like, okay. Whereas the people that got the sugar pill were like, it was stimulating the dopamine, stimulating the opiate receptor. And so that's one of the things that naltrexone can help with food cravings. But of course, you can try to do it more naturally, so you not take drugs. But so that's one interesting caveat there. And then kind of going back to the foods that are natural versus processed foods, the foods that are kind of unnatural. And so what it does to our brain stimulates the dopamine in an overwhelming way. So as we get more and more high sugar, salt, fat foods, highly processed foods, we're getting that hyper stimulation of dopamine. And so kind of like, our brain couldn't handle that much euphoria all the time. We would just laid around and done all kinds of natural drugs, things we could get a hold of, and we wouldn't be motivated to go mate or go find food, just like the rat in that experiment, right? And so our brain down regulates that dopamine sensitivity. So here's a good example. It's like, when you go into a home for the first time where there's a Christmas tree, you smell the pine, you smell the Christmas tree right away. You guys can visualize that or smell that. You walk in, and then after what, a couple, 2, 3, 4 minutes, you don't really hardly notice it anymore, right? So that's the same thing. It's basically sensitivity. You're down regulating because your brain needs to focus on other things. Oh, pine. You have to be a little more complex than that, right? And so that's what's happening with these hyper palatable foods that are super high in calorie density. When I went over the calorie density class a couple weeks ago, those things are unnatural. So those things totally hit the dopamine receptors, flood them. And then after a while, you have to have more and more to get the same high, right? Just like with drugs. addiction. And so, so we kind of lose that dopamine sensitivity. How that's so important with this is that if you're eating the standard American diet, lots of high salt, sugary, fatty foods, processed foods, when you start going on a plant-based diet, it feels wrong because you're used to these really high calorie stimulating foods, and then you start eating fruit and vegetables and beans, and potatoes and whole grains and all these foods, and you're not getting that dopamine surge, and so you actually don't feel good at all. This feels wrong. But then after, it takes a couple, 2-3 weeks, this is biologically, not talking about mental aspect of things, but as you go 2-3 weeks, your dopamine sensitivity gets better. And so it comes down, the thermostat kind of gets turned down a little bit. So then you stay off of all that food for a while, and then you eat a really super sweet piece of fruit or the banana ice cream back there. Ooh, that tastes really sweet. That actually gets your dopamine. But then if you ate that for a while and got used to that and then went back to hot fudge sundaes and donuts and all the bad stuff again, then you could try to go back to the banana ice cream again. That just tastes very sweet. I like the fruit loops and the fruit like you showed there. So any thoughts about that or questions about kind of the biology of the dopamine and how it's hyperstimulating? Because in nature, the only place that we would really get a hyperstimulation from a food product would be honey. So you come across a beehive, of course you might get stung by the bee, like that, but it's a lot of calories in a quick per bite. And so we knew that that's for survival. That's good. That's a lot of calories. We need that. But everything else is going to be way much lower in calorie density. But any questions about that before I move on? Yeah. Want to come over here? Are you okay doing that? You test it out.
Wanted to comment that it explains to me why sometimes even when I don't really like the taste of a dessert or something, I still feel very compelled to eat it. It's probably that brain chemistry instead of actually taste.
Right, so the dopamine, that's why we can eat dessert when we're full. It's just that we know we're full, we don't really need calories, but we feel like, gosh, I can handle a little more hit of dopamine. I like it, right? So always room for dessert, right? Okay, so we're going to kind of start delving into food addiction here. So there's kind of three, this is very generalized, but three basic categories. Normal eaters. So when we're overweight, we use willpower to make different food choices and we lose weight. And then we might lose the weight and then, start to maybe fall back to old habits. And we'll talk about habits in a little bit. But then our brain goes, okay, no, I need to use willpower. I need to make some better food choices and lose weight again. So that's kind of would be a normal eating pattern. And then some people are more emotional eaters. So use food to self-medicate for comfort, for underlying emotional issues. Kind of use what's called HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So some people do it for things are going well too as a celebration. So kind of emotional, use it kind of coupling food with emotion. I think most of us pretty common, but it is tapping into that dopamine because we're getting soothed by food. We all, maybe a lot of us were raised where you hurt yourself or you got some sweets or dessert or something like that because you got hurt or something went good at school or bad at school, or we kind of use food to couple it with our emotions. Then we have a lot of memories, either negative or positive memories about different foods with events and things that happened in our lives. And so that's kind of where it's starting to get a little bit dangerous because we're not just thinking about food as calories and sustenance. We're coupling it with emotions and things that have happened in our lives, and we're kind of using it a little bit like a drug because it's either it's soothing or it brings up memories and things like that. And then there's full-on food addiction, which is essentially the same as you're an alcoholic or addicted to methamphetamines or heroin or cocaine or anything else. You're actually it's really causing harm and it's causing great strife in your life and distress, and yet you still keep doing it. And we'll talk about how important it is to get full treatment for that, just like if you were addicted to cocaine or even smoking or anything else. And so I'm going to talk about that more, but It's totally, and it's something that a lot of providers and a lot of people don't really talk about. It's very well documented. There's a book I'll show you guys the books at the end. She's an addiction specialist named Vera Tarman, and there's a book called Food Junkies that's really good. And a lot of addiction specialists have written about and documented about food addiction. And you saw on the screen what happens in the brain. It's very similar, like sugar has a very similar look in the brain as cocaine does. So it hits the same areas of the brain. And so, and a lot of people just think, it's just have a little bit of this, have a little bit of that. We don't treat people with food addiction the same as we treat somebody with cocaine addiction or alcoholism. It's like, just, if someone's at a party and they're alcoholic, you don't offer them a drink and just say, oh yeah, you'll be fine, just have one. And no, we wouldn't do that. Or even someone that's a smoker, oh, just have one cigarette because we're hanging out having a drink. Let's just have one cigarette. It's like, no, I'm a non-smoker now. I quit. And so we wouldn't do that, but we do that every day with people that we may or may not know have food addiction issues. It might not just be emotional eaters or normal eaters. They actually might be a big trigger for them. So having just that one cupcake or that one thing might set them off and just send them over the edge. And so we really have to be cognizant of that and be respectful of people when we offer them, hey, well, why don't you just try this? I baked this for you, and can't you just eat this? Even though they know you're on a plant-based diet or whatever you're doing. So we really should avoid doing that because we just never know what people are going through. So that's very important. So with I'm going to give some highlights here on the food addiction on the Vera Tarman book, and I'm going to read some of other things from her book. And so first, we need to detoxify to learn about the disease. So this is the same kind of game plan roadmap as anyone in a 12-step program or any kind of addiction program. Is you don't even really understand why you're using a substance until you've actually been off of the substance for a while. You have to really, it take weeks, months sometimes to kind of think clearly and actually understand what's going on. So to learn about your disease, you first need to detoxify. And then, so often psychological issues not become obvious until addicts have been abstinent for a long period of time, like I mentioned. Food addict, just like any other person, once someone's an alcoholic, they're always an alcoholic. So once someone's a food addict, they're always a food addict. We have to identify and avoid triggers. And I want to read a couple of things from Dr. Tarman's book. So she says how addiction is both a disease and a choice. So just like any substance abuse, it is a disease and we have to treat it as such and we need the support, but ultimately it is a choice. We can choose to use the substance or not. And food addicts are always in recovery, always just one mouthful away from the next binge. Admitting we are addicts is not about holding onto a victim identity and wallowing in despair. It is simply a reminder that we are powerless over our internal urges, cravings, and addictions once they are triggered. It is our job to be sure that we identify and avoid the triggers in the first place. It is our job to avoid the first bite. So I think what's the most important is just that we get all the support we need, just like anyone that has any kind of substance abuse or substance problem would be to have a group settings, have a therapist, support with friends and family, coming to classes like this to be supported and have a community around you. Having a friend or family member that can, help your environment to be safe, and so that you don't have foods that are going to trigger you in your home. You might not be able to avoid that 100% when you're out and about or at a party or something like that, just like anyone that has substance abuse problems. But you have to kind of have a plan in place for when you might be tempted, or if you do, succumb and take a bite or do anything, that you have a plan in place. Okay, if that happens, then this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to my group class, or I'm going to make sure I come to this class, or I'm going to call Charlie or do one-on-one counseling with Lisa or something, something that you have that's in your life that you can use as a support. So a person you can go to, someone you can talk to, things like that to help with that. And another thing too is there's a book I'll show you on at the end too called The Craving Mind. It's like a psychiatrist named Judson Brewer, and he has a lot of stuff. Mostly his research was on smoking cessation, but he had whole section on like journaling and things and how to write out cravings and things, because we all are going to have those cravings. And so kind of instead of just replacing the behavior with another behavior, which that might initially sound like a good idea, like, okay, I'm craving, I'm gonna want to eat that candy or those M&Ms are at the house right now. I'm gonna eat those. It's like, well, instead of just saying, okay, no, I'm not gonna eat those, I'm gonna eat an apple and take a walk. That might sound like a good, better choice, but even what the research shows is even more effective than that is that instead of just replacing one behavior with another, less healthy behavior with a more healthy behavior, is that you're not getting at the root cause of what caused the craving in the first place. And that's where things like journaling and kind of writing out the craving, like he uses the analogy of you're on a surfboard out in the ocean and you get on the wave and you're riding the wave to shore and you're just kind of watching yourself ride the wave all the way to shore, the wave being the craving, and you're just like writing about what am I feeling? What's the sensations I'm having? What happened today that I might be having this craving? And so by journaling and just being mindful of it and being aware of what you're feeling, you can kind of the craving will eventually pass and you'll ride that wave on the shore, and then you not have to make any choice as far as good or bad choice. And so it might not work every time, but every time you make a mistake, that's a learning experience, and you don't beat yourself up about it, but you learn from it. So I think those are a couple of things that I wanted to highlight when it comes to food addiction, and just getting, being in contact with your medical provider and therapist if you need one, if food addiction is a really big issue for you. So any questions about food addiction? Comment.
Wow. And I've been through that.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
And so one thing I just want to say is that alcohol is which last year I went through 12 steps. That for me is all the difference, because it's given me the tools they're in, just like an alcoholic, a little different. But I found recovery, and it is a once addict of always. I live in recovery because I'm not found. I'm not. No longer do I. What should I eat? How much should I eat? Those things no longer. Like, and there's over years money, and there's a lot of. It is really the lifestyle work, and what you said about planning, and I know what's in my fridge, I plan ahead. I'm a person who weighs and measures food, so when you're off, I eat 3 meals a day at meals. So when you're operating, I don't think that but yeah, there's a lot of cool people.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's all about the environment too, and that's really good. And when we talk about habit forming, we talk about environment a lot. Going to the next slide there. So basic recommendations, kind of to summarize: supportive family and friends, consider behavioral health counseling. The books, The Craving Mind by Judson Brewer, Food Junkies by Vera Tarman, and then eating a whole food plant-based diet. I know my wife used to speak at the classes a lot in the past. She's got some food sugar issues herself, and what she always talked about was that all the other diets she tried, Weight Watchers, keto, low carb, all those different ones, is they always allowed her still to have the foods that she was addicted to. So like Weight Watchers has those little points and the little desserts and things like that are worth this many points, and so she'd just be eating those a lot, or even low carb, we'd have a little Atkins bars with still have sugar and stuff in them, or sugar alcohol is the sweetener, but still really hyper-stimulated. And so then you kind of wouldn't really get off the foods that were being the hyper-stimulation. That you would never get that dopamine sensitivity back because you're always still hyper-stimulating everything. Whereas if full food plant-based, what was different is that it doesn't, if you're eating it, doing 100%, only unprocessed whole plant foods, you're not going to be getting any of those foods that are going to be hyper-stimulating. And then get your dopamine sensitivity back. And then when you eat the fruit, that's like your dessert. So that's a natural amount of dopamine that's kind of like the thermostat's been turned way down, I guess is the best way to think about it. So yeah, just always share that. Go to the next slide. The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. That's where I'm going to dive into behavior change. But any other questions, comments about food addiction? It's just a general touch on that, and we can definitely talk about it more. And you can also read those books that are on the website. I'll go over those at the end. Yes. Okay. That's a
repeater question.
Yeah. So behavioral health to believe you about food addiction. I guess I guess Pam in a couple weeks can speak on this or now. She's actually a psychologist, so I think it's gaining acceptance a bit. But even if it's not, I don't know if they have to how on board they have to be. As long as it's you're just being able to be supported and go over, tell your therapist how you're feeling. And but yeah, Pam, I'll let you speak on that.
Hi, everyone. You'll see me in a couple of weeks. I'm Pam Burrell. I'm a PhD psychologist. And if your therapist doesn't believe that you have a food addiction, then you're seeing the wrong therapist. Therapy works. We'll talk about this more, but one of the ways therapy works the best is in a good relationship with the therapist. And if you don't have a good relationship, no amount of them telling you what to do or giving advice is going to work. And I don't think any therapist worth their salt would certainly believe you. If you say I have a food addiction, as a therapist, I would want to know, well, tell me more about that. Why do you think that you believe that? And the therapist is saying, I don't think you got it, then this will help you work.
So this, I'm not a scientist, so I have some confidence in certain areas. I take care of a lot of patients with mental health problems, so that under my belt for 19 years, but not as a psychologist. All right, next slide. Okay, so behavior change themes. So we're going to talk about things that also motivate us to make a behavior change. So you have to have motives. So whether that's for health or, like we talked about in the first week about finding your why, those are your motives. So I want to be able to play with my grandkids or go to my child's wedding or go on a hike or go travel, whatever your why is for making any kind of behavior change, whether it's diet or lifestyle or quitting smoking or whatever it is, you have to have those motives. And then self-regulation. So self-regulation is kind of realizing that you are the captain of your own ship, and so you have to take responsibility. You can't blame anybody else. So this is one component. So you can't say, "Oh, it's my family doesn't support me." All the reasons why you can't do it, that has to go out the window when it comes to self-regulation, because when it comes down to it, no one's physically putting food in your mouth. You have to do it, or putting the cigarette in your mouth, or not going for the walk. That there's lots of life challenges and there's lots of hurdles, but it's basically saying, well, but ultimately it's still up to me. It's my life, right? So self-regulation, resources. So that is having the support. So having classes, having a good environment at home that's your safety zone. Having friends and family that do support you, don't try to sabotage you, things like that. So and then having the education, the books, the meal plans, everything that you need to set up your environment so that you can be successful. And then developing habits, which we're gonna talk about that. And then also, yeah, the other environmental and social influences that can get in the way, like when you travel, and having basically plans in place for what you're going to do in this or that situation, so you can plan to be successful. Next slide. So there are six stages of behavior change. So we'll talk about each one just briefly. It's kind of boring, but pre-contemplation, which is, so you lack awareness. You think that the pros of your current behavior outweigh the cons of not making a change. So, so think about, okay, say you're eating the standard American diet and you lack awareness. You don't realize that eating the standard American diet puts you at high risk for heart disease and diabetes and cancer and dementia and autoimmune disease. All the bad stuff we talk about, all the chronic illnesses. You're not really aware of that, but you get so much joy and pleasure out of your diet and lifestyle that you're not willing, you're not like, well, I would, but the pros of my current lifestyle would outweighs any potential downside to what my current lifestyle is causing me. And then contemplations, so a lot of you in the room are already at least to contemplation because you're aware of the need of behavior change, but maybe you're not ready, you haven't really made a plan yet, or you haven't really made a change yet, so you're just contemplating it. And preparation is kind of like a little step further. You're starting to you haven't really changed yet, but you're starting to plan. So you're just kind of setting things up, you're thinking about a meal plan, you're kind of getting a plan in place for what you would do when you decide to make a change. And then the action is when you're implementing the behavior change. So now at the action phase, you actually now are convinced that the implemented behavior change, now you think that the cons of not doing, the cons of the previous behavior are now the pros now outweigh that. So you decide that, okay, yeah, I don't really want to get heart disease, or like Charlie and his wife, he decided, okay, I'm doing this because I don't want my wife to die from heart disease, so I'm going to make this change. So he jumped right to the action phase right away. I don't know how much time you spent, Charlie, in the pre-contemplation and contemplation and preparation.
One day.
One day. Okay. Okay. Then, then you're doing it, and then maintenance is just you're trying to maintain the behavior, and you're trying to also go into termination relapse. You're maintaining it, but you're also trying to plan for if you have a relapse, or what would I do if I kind of fall off the wagon? What's my plan? Those are important things, and a lot of times we kind of go through these cycles of change. Any questions about that? Let's kind of dry a bit. Go to the next slide. So the facts about habits.
Hold on, there's
Yeah.
a question.
Oh, yeah.
Can you ask that question at the microphone so that the people online can hear? Thank you.
When the relapse part has always been finding these 9 years and studying how is it I'm waiting for the last that part. And I don't know if I do understand that how we can find that.
Just essentially try to have a plan in place for when you do, so it doesn't. So like for food anyway, it's always like, don't let one bad meal turn into a bad day, to a week, a month. Just like dust yourself off. Like, okay, I made a bad choice, but what am I going to do next meal or next habit? So whatever, give your example of what it was that happened, and make sure you correct it right away and get back on track, instead of kind of having our kind of judging ourselves and putting ourselves down, and then, okay, well, I made a mistake, so I might as well just give up. Maybe you get back on a week later or a month later, but you want to try to get to where make a bad choice. Next action is going to be better than next week or next month. What's that? Yeah, know what we're talking about? Okay.
Have a buddy system.
Yeah, have a buddy system, right? Right. So have someone that you're accountable to. Sometimes, a lot of times, some of the, I don't know, Chuck Carroll, you guys know the weight loss champion on PCRM. Has that show, his podcast. He talks about that a lot. That because he's on the show and he's doing all these things, he's talking about it all the time. It's a good way to prevent relapse because everyone's paying attention. Sometimes people do stuff online. Sometimes not, but where you feel accountable or coming to class or just having a support around you so that someone else is accountable. Like I don't feel like going for a walk today, but your friend's counting on you to go for that walk. And so you're more likely to do it because someone else is counting on you. And you also have that human connection, that support. You guys can, if you're good friends, you can talk about, well, how I'm feeling today. And that can be very therapeutic as well. And at the same time, you're getting exercise. So those would be some things to help prevent relapse. So some other facts about habits. So if a habit refers to how you perform an action, not what the actual action is. And so and 43% of the time, our actions are habitual. I'll run through these and I'll give you some examples. Goals and rewards are critical for starting to build a habit, but do not help to make habits stick. There's a big disconnection between what we know and what we do. So some of these things we kind of know. In taming bad habits, knowledge and willpower are not. So a habit, initially to start a habit, and we all kind of have habits. One I always use as an example is whenever I get out of the shower, I always take a shower at night, and every time I get out of the shower, it's when I brush my teeth. And it's just kind of like, I don't even think about it. You just get out of the shower, you brush your teeth, bed or whatever. And at first, I learned that at some point, okay, I need to brush my teeth so I have good dental health, right? And that's my reward for starting the habit. But after a while, you don't think about it. Oh, I'm brushing my teeth. It's gonna keep plaque down, and my dentist will be happy. You don't really think about that stuff anymore because once you start doing it a few times or a few weeks, a few months, a few years, it's a total habit because you don't think about it. You're not thinking about the reward. You're just doing it because it's a habit. That's what we want to try to get your diet and lifestyle choices to be. It's just a habit. You don't even think about it anymore. So initially you got to have that reward system that make you feel good, and you have a goal and your why and all those things. But then eventually you want it to just be your. That's why we say it's not a diet; it's a lifestyle because that's just who you are now. I've been doing this 12 years, Charlie 13 years. I don't even really think about it anymore. This is what I eat. I enjoy what I eat. This is what I do. It's just normal. So it becomes normalized. And in order to do that, you have to create an environment that's supportive of that. And that's kind of what the Blue Zones project is all about. Bringing those blue zones to small other cities and towns in America is to try to make it so that the restaurants have healthy plant-based choices, and there's more walking paths and jogging paths and bicycle paths and places that are easy to walk around. And so trying to recreate those 5 blue zones where they have the healthy diet and the exercise and social support and all the things that we talk about. Is pretty much everyone here familiar with the blue zones? Yeah. If you're not, I can explain. Anyone not familiar with the blue zones? Yeah, so it's 5 places on Earth that have the most people that live to age 100. So it's Sardinia, Italy, Okinawa, Japan, Ikaria, which is in Greece, the Nicoya Peninsula of Costa Rica, and Loma Linda, California. And in those 5 places, they have the most people that live to 100. They're starting to disappear now because they're starting to, unfortunately, westernize their diets now. But they predominantly plant-based diet. They get physical activity throughout the day. Tend to only drink a small amount of alcohol. Tend to not smoke. Tend to have good social interaction, family support. So very similar lifestyles. And to me, what's more impressive than that they live to 100 at such high rates is that in their 90s, they're on no medications, no heart disease, no diabetes, no cancer. They just die from old age. It's starting to disappear now. But so that creating that kind of an environment in modern places is what the kind of the Blue Zones project is all about. So that's kind of why it's so important when you're forming habits to have a healthy, good environment. So your home is your safety zone. So you don't bring in foods to your home that you have access to that you shouldn't eat. It's going to be a different situation when you're out in the environment, out away from your home. But that's the important part to building the habits. And And so, yeah, 43% of what we do is habitual. So we're just trying to add our diet and lifestyle to that. And then I already kind of talked about how the goals and rewards are important in the beginning. And then, you know, having that disconnect between what we know and what we do. We might know what to do, but we have to develop a habit to keep to stick. And that can take anywhere from a few weeks to a few months. I think 3 to 6 months is kind of one of the kind of accepted timeframes for most people to develop a habit. So just keep at it. And then, yeah, go ahead to the next slide. Okay, and so, yeah, so more on forming habits. Our mind is not picky. Just give it repetition, rewards, and context, like we talked about. So these are just kind of bullet points. Habits form when we act repeatedly without planning and deliberating. So it's like when we talked about that, you don't even think about it anymore. You just do it. The habits come from repetition. Behavior begets behavior. You just keep doing it. It'll start happening with more and more ease. It's all about environment, environment, environment. Building the right environment is key. Make the right choice the easy choice. Make the wrong choice the more difficult one. Something called disruption. So I know my wife uses this has used this quite frequently, where like some of the plant-based cookbooks will have like Chef AJ and some of those, they have, you know, plant-based desserts, and so they're still pretty concentrated in calories, and even though they don't have like eggs and milk and like refined sugar and stuff in them, they're still, you know, pretty sweet, and still you can get the dopamine a little bit higher than you probably want, but it's still, those desserts in those cookbooks, they're plant-based, they're still better than going and getting ice cream and donuts, that stuff. So it's still going to be a level lower on your dopamine stimulation. And so, you know that when, like, I remember when my wife would make some of those desserts and she'd take them to work, and people are sitting there eating M&M peanuts and all this stuff all around the office and stuff. And then they would try some of the plant-based desserts she made. They're like, oh, this isn't sweet at all. This is terrible. And it's like, to us, it's like really rich and decadent, right? Because our dopamine sensitivity thermostat's been turned down. But where I'm getting to on the disruption is that instead of so there's no bad food in the house. If she was having a craving that she didn't feel like she could ride out, it's like, but I really need to have something. So she'd have to bake it or make it. So she'd have to spend the time making it, and then she would eat a couple of cookies or whatever from the plant-based, and then and she'd be okay. Whereas since it's not in the house, she had to do that, and that was kind of like a mindful event, and so it helped her get through that. It's kind of like someone that's a heroin addict, they go and get methadone, right? They run in a methadone clinic, for example, which gives them so instead of going out and shooting up heroin, they take the methadone. It's kind of similar to that. And so if you would have had to go out, drive to a store to get it, that's another form of disruption. It's not in your house. And so maybe by the time you decide to get in the car and go and pick it up, the craving might have passed. And you do the journaling and some of the stuff we talked about earlier, maybe that craving will pass. And so those are some examples of disruption. Go ahead to the next slide. So if we persist to do something, even though we don't value the reward as much, or the reward is no longer available, that's kind of what I talked about. And there's actually another book called Good Habits, Bad Habits by Wood. It's really good. So it's just keep doing it. And does anyone have comments about what a habit is and how to form habits, and just basically repetition, and don't expect a reward anymore? You just thoughts, questions. Yeah.
So, in order to form a habit, what do you need to do first? Did I hear have a plan? A plan to do something? So for those of you who are new to this class, there are several areas in your lifestyle choices that can make the difference as to whether you're healthy or whether you develop chronic inflammation and disease. So let's just take each one of them and see what your plan might be. So what are the 6 pillars of of lifestyle medicine? Anybody?
I have no idea.
Did someone say food? You know, what you eat, Yeah, so what's the plan for what you eat? Anybody have a plan? Think of it. Yeah, anything. Okay, so we want to eat healthy stuff. What is actually healthy? Are fruit and vegetables healthy? What might a plan be connected with fruit and vegetable? Have some,
Spinach,
have some in your house, but what else? What do you do with those some?
cook them up.
Like maybe eat an extra serving of fruit once a day for the week or 5 days of the week, a plan, and then you work on that plan and develop a habit because you actually do it. You got to make the plan something that's doable for you. If you say, "Oh, I'm going to eat healthier," is that going to work? It doesn't work. Doctors have been telling their patients for years, eat healthier. And no one knows what that means or how to go about it. Make this something that is manageable for you, but make food, what you eat, a priority. And if that's more green leafies, less calorie-based foods, like Scott talked about, and made the best argument for eating low calorie density foods, pretty much as you want. So you're never hungry. That's a great plan, but you got to make it specific enough that you can actually do it and reward yourself at the end. What's another thing on lifestyle? Sleep. What would a plan be with sleep?
Sleeping
Set a
more.
time to go to bed. Don't be sitting up watching TV till 2 in the morning. Yeah, you got it. And then you have to actually carry that out, but make it something that you can do. If it's shutting down the TV an hour before you go to bed because you have trouble getting to sleep, or if it's not looking at your iPad or looking at your phone for that last hour, that can help you with sleep, assuming there isn't some other medical problem. What's another area? What is it? Exercise. What's the plan? Walk every day. Okay, is that enough to get it done?
No.
No. Okay, what's enough to walk every day? It's different for all of us. For some of us, it may be, I have trouble walking, but I'm going to get up and move every 20 minutes to a half hour. I'm going to grab a can of beans and raise it up.
Oh, potty, hurry up.
Okay. All right. It could be I'm going to walk for 10 minutes twice a day or once a day and develop a habit. Once you've done it for 2 or 3 weeks, then you can increase from there. But you need the plan. You need to have something that is meaningful to you that you can actually do. And then you need to do it. And the same thing goes for what are the others. When it comes to alcohol, what's the plan? If you're drinking 5 drinks a day, what's the plan? Maybe I could drink 4 drinks a day or 3 drinks, whatever the plan may be. If you want to get healthier and you know that's not so healthy, the same way with smoking, or maybe you'll just say, if you're really motivated, I'm going to quit, whatever. And then there are issues of social connection. What's the plan for social connection? Come here. Do it. Don't just say it, do it. Come every week. If you can't come to the classes because of the transportation, then go online and watch. If you can't do that, then go to the archive sessions and watch. But you have a plan and just do it. Listen to a Gregor video every other day or every day. I mean, there are things you do every day for your health. What are they? You sleep every day. You eat every day. You're moving every day. You could listen to a video every day. It would be really, that's what I did for a while when I first started transitioning, and it became a habit. Okay, and then what did we miss here?
TikTok.
Stress. How do
Go
we
for a walk.
stress? What's the plan?
Good job.
Quit your job. I love it. This is uh, okay. So whatever works for you, make it so it's something manageable that you can measure and that, you know, is doable. You can feel good about after a couple weeks of doing it every single day of your life. Now, don't try to do all of these at the same time. Pick one, focus on it, build up your confidence, and gain your life back.
Yeah.
I know I'm gonna do it and easier said than done.
The comment was to be strict with yourself, have a plan and stick to it. So be kind to yourself and non-judgmental, but still be firm. I want to show some of the resources here.
One more
One more quick,
question.
That's how it's working. And I do, but I do try and say that.
So every choice you make, your lifestyle, is this choice contemplating, is it going to help you reach your goals? That's the truth. Yeah. You take one bite of it and throw the rest away. Kind of wean yourself off of it. Bad foods.
Yeah.
Good. I want to, yeah.
That's
No, I want to go back to go to the website, class website. I want to go over some of the resources that I mentioned.
Class
Then I
website.
talked about the video willpower instinct. Well, after I show you the resources on that I want to show you on the class website, if we have time, unless you guys have questions, you want to have a discussion, we can do that. But I was going to show a little section of video, the willpower instinct, and it's really good. So if we don't have time to get to that, it's on the section of the class website. As a homework assignment, watch it because it's really good. I'll take the seat. I can remember everything. Okay. All right. So let's go to, here's the class website, livelifestylemedicine.com. Let's click on resources. Scroll down here. So we'll go to handouts from classes, which is here. Start with that. And then, your whys for change. So down towards the bottom, I have a little handout on what is your why for lifestyle change. So you can, okay, so I can click on it. It's just really short, but it's just basically some things to think about, motivations to change, why is health important to you? So something to kind of thought experiment to do for yourself if you're contemplating change, like we talked about. So definitely check that out. Go back. Then I guess it's the book section. I'm going to go to back up to the top tab, and we'll go to books. So you can either click on resources or just hover over books. You could have got to it that way too. Scroll down. Let's go to links to books. You know, all the different books that we recommend from the different classes over time are all listed here. So there's How Not to Die, Salt, Sugar, Fat. That's actually a good one for kind of with the kind of addicted to salt, sugar, and fat. some other ones that Charlie probably will talk about next week. There's that Craving Mind one, Judson Brewer. So these are links to get it on Amazon if you want. Charlie and I don't have any financial ties to any of this stuff. It's just books we've read and we recommend. So there's The Pleasure Trap, Doug Lyle and Alan Goldhammer. So I was talking about that motivational triad at the beginning. There's The Good Habits, Bad Habits by Wendy Wood. There's The Food Junkies by Ira Tarman. And let's see. Yeah, I guess I could go to the videos. Show you some of that. Do you guys have questions right now, or do you want to watch some of this video? Thoughts on that? So you can go to video section right here. So it is really, really good. And it kind of pulls a lot of this together. Two videos. There's Willpower Instinct right here. So Kelly McGonigal, she's a health psychologist at Stanford. Got it.
I'm delighted to welcome to the Googleplex Kelly McGonigal, a health psychologist at Stanford University and the author of a new book, The Willpower.
Let's watch a little.
Lots of decisions every day about what to eat and what to do. Okay, well, these are all great examples of willpower challenges. And I want to just start with a little definition, my definition of willpower or willpower challenge. And I define a willpower challenge as something that is basically a competition between two parts of yourself. Neuroscientists are famous for saying that even though we have one brain, we actually have two minds. And we are completely different people depending on which mind is active or which systems of the brain are more active. And so a willpower challenge is anything where those two versions of yourself have competing goals. So, for example, there may be part of you that really wants to eat a candy bar for your snack. And then there's a part of you that actually has some longer term goals. You're thinking health, you're thinking weight loss, you're thinking bikini season, whatever. And maybe the banana seems like the better snack. And again, both of these choices you might be drawn to by different parts of your mind or two different versions of yourself. And one of the things that has really influenced my work with willpower is thinking about it in terms of what's going on in the brain. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today. The fact that you could be the very same person, but depending on your mindset, depending on your energy, depending on your stress levels, your brain is going to meet this willpower challenge in a different way. And you're going to end up making, one choice today and one choice tomorrow. So as mentioned, this book is based on a class that I teach at Stanford called The Science of Willpower. Those are our actual students. I'm not sure what I said that was funny, but those are actual Science of Willpower students. And I created this course because I'm trying to teach people how to be more productive, how to improve their health. And everywhere I went, said, oh, we know we're supposed to do that stuff already. We just don't want to do it. And there was this really
That was your last time for the night.
Between what people wanted and what they thought they wanted. That is, people were very identified, you could say, with this version of the self. People felt like deep down, they were the person who wanted the candy bar. And this other person who wanted the banana, like, who is that? That's not really me. And I realized that people didn't just need to know what is the right thing to do or the healthy thing to do or tips for stress management and productivity. They needed to feel like this person. And they needed to know how to be that person as the default, rather than walking around always feeling like they had to resist this core self that only wants immediate gratification or never wants to do anything difficult. Okay, so that's how the class came about. There we go. Okay, great. So I thought today, since this is a class based on science, that I would share with you 5 of my favorite experiments from the class and from the book. And I chose experiments that I like because they use tiny interventions, really, really small interventions to shape people's behavior. And they have very large outcomes. And I think this is the kind of thing many of us are looking for. One small change we can make, whether it's a change in how we think or change in the way that we're approaching a willpower challenge, that can have huge payoffs down the road, making it easier to do what it is we really deep down want, even when it's sometimes difficult or part of us doesn't want. Okay, so let's start with the first experiment. How many of you guys sometimes feel like this guy? I know at least one of you only had 3 hours of sleep last night. Yeah. So it turns out that when you're this version of yourself, every willpower challenge is more difficult.
And the first intervention that I want to tell you about is actually a sleep intervention. The main intervention was trying to help people sleep more or sleep better. And it was people who had a very serious willpower challenge. These are people who were recovering from addiction to drugs, and they were in a substance abuse recovery program. And half of the people in the standard care were assigned to take a mindfulness meditation training that was designed to help them improve their sleep or sleep more. And so the first thing I want you to take a look at on this graph, this is minutes of sleep per night. And you're going to think this is insanely optimistic, I know, but everyone's starting around 7 hours, and we're going to improve on 7 hours. And that probably seems an impossible dream. Okay, so everyone in the group was starting around 7 hours. And what the researchers found was that just doing a little bit of meditation every day, breath-focused meditation, increased sleep time to just over 8 hours a day. And the control group had a little bit of deterioration to slightly less than 7 hours of sleep a night. You know, that's not the interesting finding. I mean, it is nice to know that if you meditate for a few minutes a day, you will sleep better and get more sleep. But what's interesting is how that change in sleep time then made these recovering addicts impervious to relapse. They were stronger against relapse. And this is a very high correlation, 0.70. The increase in sleep time predicted resistance to relapse with a correlation of 0.70. Getting 1 more hour of sleep a night suddenly made it a lot easier for these recovering addicts to resist the temptation of falling off the wagon. And interestingly, the number, I never know, it's going to bounce off the screen, right? I should point at the screen. You guys are tech experts. The number of minutes per day that people meditated also predicted resistance to relapse. There were really 2 things going on in this intervention. There was getting more sleep, and there was also something about the actual practice time. And it wasn't a lot, but it was something like 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day. And both of these things, sleep and meditation, were giving people more willpower for one of the biggest willpower challenges. So I wanted to think together a little bit about why those 2 small interventions, an hour more sleep or 10 minutes of meditation a day, might actually give us more willpower for any willpower challenge. What you're looking at here is an image from an study of what happens to the brain when you're a little bit sleep deprived. And most studies use less than 6 hours of sleep a night as sleep deprived, which may seem normal to you, but for most of us, that's actually functioning far suboptimal. What you're looking at here is a composite of a lot of different people's brains, some who are sleep deprived and some who are not. And we're going to slice the brains. So imagine me standing this way, and we're going to have one of those like meat slicers. And we're going to slice down the head and just start taking sections off and look down the middle. And so where you see these yellow spots, that's the front of the brain right about here or right about here. That were my brain pointing that way. And yellow means that this area of the brain is underactivated when you have less than 6 hours of sleep a night. So this area of the brain is unable to do its job as efficiently. And the red areas are areas that are more activated, sort of midbrain regions that are associated with basic impulses and instincts. So when you're getting less than 6 hours of sleep a night, your brain is actually unable to recruit the systems of the brain that you need to be that better version of yourself. This area of the brain, I love this image because it's like, here's where the balance is weighed. Do I want the weight loss or do I want the chocolate bar? And this area of the brain right here is basically keeping track of your goals. And it's sort of a hard job. It's heavy lifting it needs to do is to remember long-term goals, core values. And when it is unable to do that, when it's underfueled or when it's underactive, your brain thinks all you really want is the chocolate bar, or to procrastinate, or to follow that link through, or to not bother doing your yoga exercises. And so in some key way, the ability to remember who you are and what your big goals are is dependent on the ability of this area of the brain to use energy well. And sleep deprivation is one of the main things that can get in the way of that. And I think that's one of the reasons why this small sleep intervention ended up helping people resist relapse to drug addiction, because they now had brains that were better fueled to remember their goals to stay clean and sober. And it's not just sleep that impacts the physiology of your brain, how well your brain uses energy. There are a couple of other things that seem to really strengthen the ability of the brain's frontal regions to do what they're supposed to do to help you control impulses and find your motivation. And here are the 4 things from the research that seem to do it, to make your brain a kind of willpower machine. One is sleep, as I mentioned, and hopefully there's going to be one thing on this list that you're not currently doing that you're willing to do, because you don't have to do all four. So getting a little bit more sleep really makes the prefrontal cortex better able to regulate those systems of the brain that direct you towards temptation and immediate gratification. And meditation also. And both meditation and physical exercise have been shown not only to make your brain more efficient at using these self-control systems, but they actually make these systems bigger and better connected to the regions that they are supposed to be controlling. And again, it can be a very quick time course to see these benefits. People who meditate maybe 10 minutes a day, after a couple of months, their brains look different. These regions are bigger and better connected. People who work out on a regular basis who used to be sedentary, again, studies show that in as little as a couple of months of regular workouts, their prefrontal cortices are bigger and denser and better connected. And so these are two of the things you can do that actually train the physiology of your willpower. And the last thing that the research suggests is what you eat has a very big influence on whether or not your brain is able to be this better version of yourself. There's something about having big spikes in blood sugar levels and then big drops in blood sugar levels that really screws up how the brain uses energy. And you need your brain to be like an energy efficient machine if you're going to be walking around the world in that kind of better you mindset rather than that kind of basic impulse you. And so research shows that shifting to eating a more plant-based diet actually changes the way the brain functions and has a lot to do with what's going on with your blood sugar levels. And so these are all things that we sometimes think of as requiring willpower, right? We think, okay, I have to sit down and force myself to meditate. I have to work out. I have to say no to the donut and eat something, that has fiber in it for breakfast. But we rarely think about the fact that actually not doing these things may be part of what makes it so difficult to begin. And there's a kind of a curve where when we first start, it feels like we're using willpower, but everything on this list that takes a little bit of willpower to begin with ends up giving you back far more willpower than they take. And not just for these challenges. It's not just that exercising makes it easier to exercise. Studies show that exercising makes it easier to eat right, to not spend too much money, to stop procrastinating, to pay better attention. All of these things have a kind of global training effect on what you could think of as your willpower muscle. Was there a question up front or a comment? So the question is, why does it say low glycemic and plant-based? There's actually more evidence that a vegan diet does this better than a diet that is low glycemic and includes animal products, but I'm not sure that that's entirely realistic for everyone. So I think you can kind of pick your which way you're willing to go with that. Both low glycemic and plant-based help.
Goes on for quite a bit longer. You can watch the rest of that if you want. And you actually, plant-based diet, you said vegan diet, but plant-based diet, you're following what we're teaching is also low glycemic. So yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I encourage you to watch the rest of that.
So there's a few more minutes left in the class. Questions for the people who are new? A few more minutes. Yes. Do you want to come up and ask the question? Want to make sure you get the question.
I've been coming for a couple of weeks. I've been really inspired by the videos that you make. Both of Kelly's videos. I printed out two things. I did a screenshot because she talks about and for a lot of us, if you don't know how to plan for that, you wind up getting into it. And I work a pretty stressful job, and I actually experienced it. I had a confrontation with someone. I knew that it was coming, and I thought, oh. And so I made a conscious choice to eat chocolate rather than an entire chocolate bar to soothe that rough, jagged feeling that it wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, it's just, we all deal with stress in our lives. And so it was just realizing I was at the top of that wave, getting ready to go down, and I could make a conscious choice. Did I just binge on sugar, or did I have 2 chocolate chips and think, I beat it this time, and next time I won't need any chocolate chips? And then the other part that for me was really eye-opening is she talks about acknowledging your future self. So I'm here with my mom and she's 80. And she is my inspiration because she wants to live to 100. So that means the bar is set high for me. So I probably need to live to 105, 110. So if I don't acknowledge who my 105-year-old person looks like and start saying that's who I am, then I'm short-circuiting my whole entire process of the rest of my life that I'm living for. And so I printed that out as well, and I have these hanging in my kitchen. Just a reminder of what I'm going towards.
Thank you so much. It's stories like that that inspire us to keep teaching another class. We want to have people have those inspirational times in their life. Anybody else cares to share anything or have a question? How could this be actually helpful? Yeah, sure. There's just so that people online can hear it. We'll soon have hands up. You want to get up?
Well, there's this, I studied this guy named Jack Lewis. I freaking love that guy. He's like he passed away at 96 years old.
877, love.
Yeah.
77.
Exactly. It's amazing. But he has this habit that I'm trying to form. I think it's a little bit extreme, so I don't know how to approach it. But my partner, she's a professional chef. So she makes like all of my meals. She does like my macaroni for me. We have our differences, but we meet in the middle. She likes to go out. I'm more like, let's cook so I can try everything up and just do it. With Jack LaLanne, he was very militant about when he goes out with his wife, he has the confidence to tell the waiter exactly how he wants the food. That scares me. But that's a little bit extreme even when you go to fancy restaurants. How do you do that? Not to the extreme level of him, but just kind of feel that as time go on.
Oh, I'm pretty extreme myself. I don't like to eat out at all.
Yeah.
But when I go to a restaurant, I'm going to make sure that I'm eating healthy food. So I will tell the waiter, or I will ask them at the front desk before we actually eat. Do you have a baked potato that I could eat that doesn't have butter in it? It's not swimming in oil. Do you saute vegetables and not use oil? Could you just steam them? Would you do that for us or not?
Or
The answers are not
not
healthy. Find another place to eat. We don't eat out that much, so you're gonna have more challenge. But I wouldn't be the least embarrassed about asking for that. And most restaurants will probably accommodate you with your upfront commission. Sometimes they've told me, no, we don't have that. There's another, anybody else who wants to chime in?
I eat out a lot. I do a lot of meetings in restaurants, and I have gotten very clear about what I want in a restaurant. Baked potato, of course, it's after 4 o'clock if you get a baked potato. But I find that most restaurants, if you're courteous and polite, they'll do what you want them to do. I mean, there's places like one of the places that I go to because they will do exactly what I want is Red Robin. Sounds funny, right? Hamburger joint, but they have garden burgers, which are prepared. It's not the best, but it's better than beef. But they have a side salad to die for, and it's bottomless. Their steamed broccoli is bottomless, and it's steamed. And so I'll order a side salad. So just bring me one big bowl, bring me 2 salads, and I bring my own salad. So I find restaurants really accommodating about that. So there are a few that are tough, but most of them will help you.
So, be curious to follow your progress as you deal with this. It is a challenge, and it'd be interesting. Bring your water. Yeah. We'd love to have it. Oh, yes. We have just a few more minutes.
I have a comment about being nervous about going to a restaurant. I have a daughter-in-law and two granddaughters that have food allergies. I do not want to see them go into anaphylactic shock. So it's very important when we speak to the waiter that we know how that food is going to be prepared. You have that same right too. It doesn't matter whether you've got a food allergy or you're concerned about your health and want to eat correctly. Don't hesitate. If they won't accommodate you, leave and find somewhere to go.
Thank you. You can tell us on the microphone. Thank you.
Oh, unrefined. It's over on Shadow View, over behind Costco. And everything is organic, everything is plant-based, everything is made fresh every day. And when you get a bowl, like I like this rebel bowl they make, it feels like it's like a meal, but it feels like dessert. It's great.
Thank you. Unrefined.
Yeah.
Do you have any last comments?
Yeah, anyone else?
Okay. We're down to literally 2 minutes, then we have to kind of pack up. You know, we have limited time here, but we will be back next week with some more fun for you. Any last questions from anyone or something you'd like to input with the group? Remember, for those of you who are new, we not only do these classes, but if you need one-on-one help because you're a little shy, you don't want to speak up, you can feel free to contact us. We'll do a phone call with you. We don't charge. There's no fees for any of this. This is community service that we're providing, and the payment we get is the inspiring stories from all of you. So,
Yeah,
thank you, Scott.
Yeah,
And thank you all.
thank you for coming.
Thanks for coming. Hope to see you next week.
Thanks, you guys online. Thanks for coming, guys. Yeah. I'll end.
You're welcome.